What's up, guys? I'm John.
My name is Chris.
And we are the Heck, and today we're checking out some more Overlord lore!
Yeah.
And this one is actually How Strong is Pandora's Actor? We've checked out a couple of the How Strong series from AniNews. But I'm stoked about this one because, like, dude, we don't know a lot about him.
Yeah, we don't know. All we know is that he can, like, change forms and,
he
like,
can
be other people. Yeah, he can doppelgang.
He's good at doppelganging. So I'm really stoked to be checking this out. And, yeah, we've checked out a lot of other parts on this playlist. We're actually on episode 17, or number 17, out of freaking 34 from AniNews.
Wow. Over halfway.
Right. So in saying all that, if y'all are new to our channel, smash that sub button. If you guys want to watch the Overlord movie reaction that we did, there is a link to our Patreon in the description below. And we've gone through all of the other seasons of Overlord. We're completely caught up, and now we're just watching lore until we get the next movie, and then also until we get the next freaking season.
Yes.
So either way, if you guys want to, smash the sub button, and let's get into this together. Freaking boop! And then hitting that play button, boom!
Surprisingly, in Overlord, doppelgangers are one of the few races whose abilities are fairly well defined and explained.
Hell,
so unlike last time, where we talked about various historical influences on Pandora's actor,
I'm really curious what people thought about the last episode, dude. That was wild.
Entirely related to Overlord itself, this time we're going to dive deep into the facts of the novel. So join me as we take a look at everything from his build and abilities to a very extensive breakdown as to what exactly a doppelganger is, to hopefully answer the question in the title by not actually answering the question at all. How strong is Pandora's actor? Before we start, just the usual quick plug of my Overlord merch.
Listen, I hate to even do this, but like their shop is not actually working at the moment, and I really want to like get a shirt, but listen, their shop just doesn't have shirts right now.
Pandora's actor has 45 levels dedicated to racial classes, with 15 in Doppelganger, 10 more in Greater Doppelganger,
Greater
the remaining 20 are unknown.
Ever-changing man
just
without
like
a face.
All the other heteromorphic races, being a doppelganger gives you access to a full racial class tree, and you gain the ability to choose from a multitude of subvariants as you level.
Oh, that's cool.
So Doppelganger would seem to be the first, then Greater Doppelganger after that. And beyond that, in the remaining unknown 20 levels, is a possibility of even more powerful variants.
Master
As
Doppelganger?
I'm throwing the word doppelganger around, there is the chance that many of you may not even know what a doppelganger is. So allow me to give you a bit of insight into the term.
Is it a
The word originates from mid-19th century Germany as a descriptive term for paranormal apparitions or beings that appear identical to another living person. The word itself is a combination of two nouns, with doppel meaning double and ganger meaning walking. In this classical sense, a doppelganger isn't someone that transforms as we're familiar with. It's closer to a creature that was born as an identical clone.
That's such a cool picture, dude. Holy shit.
Creepy.
It's frequently used to refer to mythological creatures who can adopt the form of others. Though they aren't just mere shapeshifters who can assume an alternate form. They actively mimic other individuals, typically for nefarious purposes. Meaning that not only can they transform into other creatures and imitate their appearance, but they can also copy their capabilities. Special attacks, spells, racial abilities. In their new form, a doppelganger has access to pretty much anything the original has access to.
Yeah,
that's
This
pretty
is
wild.
no mere lookalike. No, this is a full-on transformation.
Oh,
When
damn.
transformed, they gain all the benefits and drawbacks of their new form, as if their new form was their regular.
Like
Both
full power
racial weaknesses
totality?
and racial advantages are
okay.
adopted, and their
That's
base
probably where
stats
that
are even
master
adjusted to be
doppelganger comes in,
equivalent to the
or the
original.
greater.
The only thing a doppelganger can't imitate is special equipment and gear. While they can look as if they are wearing the gear if need be, this is merely for appearances only, and they don't gain any of its benefits or stat boosts.
Oh, that's
that
cool.
being said, the doppelganger can always simply wear the equipment in question if they can somehow obtain it. As a matter of fact, doppelgangers can bypass any race or class restrictions on the gear in question.
Damn, that was such an awesome
gear
episode.
can only be worn by, say, dwarves or birdmen. Some weapons can only be wielded by warriors, others only by mages. But
then that brings in like this one question that I would have then. So like say he did doppelgang, like shapeshift into Beto's like warrior outfit, right? What actually does he have on then? And is that actually armor at anything? Does it give him any stat boost at all? Or no?
That's a good question.
You know what I mean? Like what actually
Might
is
just
it?
be like made out of similar material or something. I don't know.
You know what I mean?
Maybe it gives him. Yeah. That's a good question.
I don't know, man. Shoutier's red armor. What if he changed into that? But like, what does it actually do? Is it just his body doing it? And thus it's like no stats added, or is it like something, whatever he's wearing at the moment?
Yeah,
then
like
it changes it to that.
partial defense kind of or something.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
A doppelganger can ignore all these limitations and restrictions, though it's not clear whether they innately ignore all restrictions regardless of what form they assume, or whether they have to assume the form of a being with a particular race or class in order to utilize particular pieces of equipment restricted to that race or class. Now, as I go on to further speak of the finer details on the doppelganger race, just remember that they all apply to Pandora's actor. Though I may not be talking about him explicitly, it's still just as relevant. So moving on. Doppelgangers, unlike shapeshifters, must imitate a specific form belonging to someone else. They cannot make modifications to the form, nor can they create their own. Meaning, it has to be a form belonging to someone else, and it can only be imitated exactly.
Oh, wow.
It's possible that they must first witness, meet, or study the individual in question before they can transform into them. But a doppelganger's imitation is moderately dependent upon the perception that others have on the form that they've chosen. Once transformed, a doppelganger actively reads the surface thoughts of those who knew the person being imitated, and it uses that to subtly adjust its behavior and appearance to match the expectations that they have.
That's
and
awesome.
when I say surface thoughts,
So it's like
I'm actually referring to a limited telepathy effect
I guess
that
so. It
doesn't
seems
quite
like
go
it.
to the extent of reading a person's past memories or really accessing their subconscious, but it's more simply listening to the voice in their head, their surface thoughts. Thus, a doppelganger is ironically most effective against the people who knew that person extremely well, since they would have
That's
the most
pretty wild.
accurate perceptions.
You would think it would
It's
be the
quite
opposite.
the interesting tactic to refine one's imitation, and I'm sure Pandora's actor excels at it, given his high-level genius. Now, being aware of this basic telepathy, it's not really surprising that the greatest threat to a doppelganger is a crowd or party, as it may have difficulty melding all of their expectations together or discerning which individuals have the most reliable and accurate understanding of the person that they're meant to imitate. If everyone in a large group hates them out of prejudice rather than personal first-hand experience, they may act out of character in an attempt to reinforce that prejudice. Then
Pretty solid.
close friends who later hear of the events might grow suspicious that their buddy was acting all weird. Even more so, since the reading of surface thoughts is a form of attack, it can be resisted or outright negated by immunities, such as Ainz's passive undead immunity to mind-affecting attacks. Now you may be wondering, how the hell did this work in the world of Yggdrasil? Because the last time I checked, video games didn't let you listen to people's thoughts.
Right?
Well, all of this was merely a footnote in the bestiary lore entry in the game. But after having migrated to the new world, it became an active and functional mechanic. Presumably in the game, you could use doppelgangers to imitate other players to trick their friends and guildmates, or to beat certain quests, or even just as a versatile generalist who can cover multiple roles.
Dang.
Let's shift to a bigger question now. Who and what exactly can a doppelganger imitate at each level? A standard doppelganger, which maxes out at 15 levels, can imitate any creature up to level 40. A greater doppelganger, which maxes out at an additional 10 levels, can imitate any creature up to level 60.
At level and below.
Incidentally, you can distinguish between the two based on the number of fingers that they have on each hand in their doppelganger form.
Oh, dang.
Greater doppelgangers have 4, and regular doppelgangers have 3.
Oh.
And since Pandora's actor is able to imitate creatures up to level 100, namely all of the supreme ones, there are presumably more powerful doppelganger types.
Yeah.
And once again, presumably, that's what the rest of his 20 or so racial levels
He's
are
the
dedicated
greatest
to.
doppelganger.
Yeah.
Though he still only has 4 fingers per hand. Perhaps there's a hidden doppelganger level above these ones that maxes out at 5 levels, similar
Lord of the
to
Castle.
Ainz's Overlord.
Right.
Maybe something like an Ultra or Super Doppelganger.
Well, didn't it say
Even a
Master
lesser
Doppelganger was one?
below the standard one would allow us to make more sense of this. I mean, the possibility seems relatively balanced. If a lesser doppelganger requires 15 levels, then it can imitate creatures up to level 20. Then the standard would require another 15 racial levels and bring us up to 30, while allowing for imitations up to level 40. Then the greater doppelganger would bring us up to 40 racial levels, while allowing for an imitation up to level 60. And finally, the super ultra doppelganger, which costs another 5 racial levels, brings us to Pandora's 45, and would allow for that imitation up to any level. Alternatively, perhaps the first 60
Super
levels
ultra
are just relatively easy
doppelganger.
to imitate, and the remaining 40 require
That was such a
certain
badass
specializations
episode,
to
dude.
achieve.
Yeah.
For instance, There could very well be doppelganger variants or subtypes that are specialized towards improving specific forms over others. If that was the case,
like beasts.
then there's probably a doppelganger
Stuff like
subrace that specializes in imitating heteromorphs and can break past that normal level limit of 60 that greater doppelgangers have. But once again, only when imitating heteromorphs due to that special subvariant. Though this is just speculation. Those last 20 racial levels could very well be anything. But given the fact that he can imitate level 100 beings, we can be certain that it is some kind of doppelganger. Now, you might be thinking, doppelgangers sound incredibly broken, but there are
The
actually
animation
a
on
good
his
deal of
talking is
limitations and drawbacks.
freaking mint.
Obviously, I've already explained the weaknesses of being unable to replicate equipment.
Okay, really quick, is that from an actual game? Because we were seeing something earlier that showed some stuff looked like it was from a game.
Looks like it's from Skyrim.
Yeah. It does. Sorry, never mind. Dang
And
it.
as it is with any MMO, equipment can change everything. Just look at Ainz's fight with Sheltier.
That was awesome.
Yeah, he basically.
So, a doppelganger is much less capable than what they're imitating unless they already have comparable equipment for themselves. Another potential limitation could be the number of transformations permitted per day, though
okay.
it's not too clear whether one actually exists
Dude, that
or
dragon
if
looked
there's even a time
badass.
limit on the duration of the transformation itself. But most special abilities like this do impose some kind of threshold. This is important for two reasons. First, if you have to switch repeatedly or use up time, you may eventually run out, and you'll become stuck in a particular form for an extended period of time, or even revert
dude, that
to your
episode was
lesser doppelganger
freaking
form.
wild.
Second, there are actually certain spells that can revert or disable a doppelganger's shapeshifting ability. We're not given any specific name
transform.
or their level, but apparently Ainz knows that a few of them exist. Lower leveled variations simply revert them to their doppelganger form, forcing them to spend time and potentially one of their limited daily uses to transform back.
I know this is like a super random question to be asking right here, but have we ever seen Ainz except for the Shaltier fight, which even then we pretty much knew that he knew he had shit under control. It could have gone sideways, but he knew it wasn't going to go sideways because he had all this, like, everything
Equipment,
figured out.
yeah.
Have we ever seen him struggle even a little bit or even be slightly nervous? Ever? Because even, like, all the battles that he's done, he's, like, really hasn't even, like, whenever he was like, oh, let's see what this does, and he did that one magic, there was, like, that black orb or whatever, and he killed all the people in the field. He was like, I was just wondering what this would have done. He just wanted to try it out, remember?
I think so.
It was like one of the really big wars. There's like a whole, like this massive army coming in. He just pretty much annihilated them all, like just by trying out this thing. That he was like, I just want to see what this is going to do. And he like obliterated everybody.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, oh my God, I can't remember how many people it was, but it was like a ton. So I don't think we've ever seen him. I mean, the reason I bring this up is because if you look back at this, like,
to spend time and potentially one of their limited daily uses. To
hold on, it's going to show
back.
this right here.
While stronger variations,
Like, this is
not
pretty
only
cool
revert
looking.
them, they also disable further transformations for an extended amount of time. And
Well, shit, I can't
doppelgangers
find
in
it.
their
Either
base
way.
form are quite weak, much weaker than similar units of their level. So Drew,
Yeah, no, so you just show it. But either way, there's a scene with like him with like thousands of people in his army behind him. I just don't see anybody in this world opposing him, is what I'm trying to say. I guess.
Yeah, I
the
don't
time
think
that
there's
they're in
ever
their
anything
doppelganger
close,
form,
really.
Yeah.
they're actually quite vulnerable and pretty useless.
Except for that guy.
Of course, wasting
Yeah.
time to cast such a spell on a hunch that a person that you're with is actually a doppelganger can give your enemy the advantage, so it's not very practical to use it every fight. Okay, so it may seem like a nice exploit to create an army of level 45 doppelganger NPCs and have them go around imitating level 100 guards.
Right.
But if you were to fight a foe that knows or suspects that your army is made up of doppelgangers, a single spell can turn your army into a giant XP farm. Though it's highly doubtful
dang.
that anyone in the New World knows or has access to such spells, so Pandora's actor himself should be fine.
Well, except for that
Furthermore,
dude, we haven't
though
seen the
not
dragon
confirmed,
much
I
since
suspect
then.
that there's an additional limitation placed on doppelgangers, namely that they can't transform into anything that's a higher level than they are. Also, it would seem that by extrapolating a bit of information from the light novel, the total number of forms that a doppelganger has access to seems to be dependent on their level, though once again, it's not stated explicitly in the light novel. It's not as if they can just copy anyone they've ever seen at any time. They only have a limited number that they can choose from at any given moment.
That's cool.
As a matter of fact, since Nabe only has one form other than her normal doppelganger appearance and one level of doppelganger, while Pandora's actor has 45 forms and 45 levels of we assume to be doppelganger,
that
from
makes
this,
sense.
it would seem that you gain one additional form for each level of doppelganger that you obtain.
Okay, that makes sense.
Naturally, you'd assume that these weren't permanent choices that took up a transformation slot forever. But whether you could swap them out for others or not is still not clear. I mean, it wouldn't really make sense to not be able to swap out forms, especially if you're leveling up early on in the game and have a low-level form that you want to replace with a stronger one.
Yeah.
After all, Yggdrasil did have a global respec mechanic.
I
and
love
you
that
can
they're
use
showing
that
this
to
right
quickly
now.
remove 5 levels that you
Boy
didn't
of
play.
the sun.
You could very easily
Souls
gain
3,
those
I
5
think.
levels back relatively
definitely one of
quickly
them. I don't
due to
know.
the
They
way that
look like
XP
it.
was tuned. Most players got to level 100 pretty fast, and the bulk of your power was dependent on gear, build, and tactics. So players didn't really mind dying as a method of respecking. So if there actually was no method of replacing old forms that you didn't like with new ones manually, then you could simply die and lose access to 5 forms along with the 5 levels that you lost. Of course, this option isn't so easily mimicked in the new world. You don't just automatically respawn back in some kind of safe zone.
Yeah.
You have to be resurrected with a spell of at least level 5 or higher, and very few denizens outside of Nazarick have access to such spells. The last and
I don't
probably
remember that,
most
do you?
important
The
limitation
resurrecting?
is that a doppelganger's
I can't remember
imitation
who they
isn't
did,
perfect.
who they
While they
resurrected
can
right there.
imitate all of the abilities of a creature, their
I don't remember
efficacy
it from
with
the
said
show, though.
abilities is
It
reduced
might have been in
relative
the
to the
movie,
original.
or one of the movies.
I'm going to be pulling out a few numbers right now, so I'll try to make this as easily digestible as possible. But specifically, while a greater doppelganger can imitate creatures up to level 60, its actual abilities are only around 80 to 90% as potent as the original.
Okay,
For
well that
example,
makes sense though.
Pandora's actor can imitate the guild members of Ainz Urlgom, a selection of level 100 creatures, but with only 80% of their potency.
That's what I was
Base
thinking.
stats
I was like,
such
it
as
can't
HP,
be
MP,
100%.
physical
Yeah, 'cause
attack,
then it'd be like,
partial attack,
yeah.
physical defense, magical defense,
Adaptable.
agility, and resistances are changed to be equal to the original. But
That's
the
really cool,
actual
though.
output of any special ability or attack is 20% less. Now, at first glance, that doesn't seem like a significant drawback. A 20% penalty in exchange for being able to imitate 45 different creatures seems reasonable. You can be an ultra-specialized crafter, or a spellcaster, or a warrior with a perfectly optimal and hyper-specialized build.
Yeah.
Then fill basically any role, but also be able to ignore any downsides or limitations at will by transforming into something else. And all it costs is a measly 20% potency reduction. Right?
Which is pretty badass sounding.
Well, it's not quite as simple as it sounds. First of all, it's hard to predict what a 20% reduction in attack power or defense actually leads into in terms of damage output or survivability. After all, attack power and defense interact with each other. So let's take a look at a simple example and do some quick maths. Say my special attack does 1000 damage per hit, and my defensive skill blocks 800 damage. If I was fighting someone with identical stats to myself, I'd do 200 damage per hit to them, and they'd deal 200 damage to me. But if I'm fighting against a doppelganger with only 80% potency on their skills identical to mine, then that means the total damage they do with their attack is 800, and their defensive skill is now only able to block 640 damage. If they were to hit me now, their 800 damage goes up against my 800 defense and does 0 damage each hit, whereas if I hit them, my 1000 attack versus their 640 defense means I now do 360 damage per hit.
That makes
Consider
sense.
for a moment the implications of that. A mere 20% debuff means that they'll now take 80% more damage than if they weren't a doppelganger but still had identical stats to me. And their 20% lower attack means they'll essentially do no damage, and I'm standing here laughing like Kirito on that bridge. So from this basic example, we see a 20% difference in the input leads to a well over 80% difference in the output.
That's a
While
really cool way of
Yggdrasil
looking
probably
at it.
operates on a much more complicated damage formula, as most games tend to do. Since we don't
Dang
know
it.
exactly what it is, it's extremely difficult to determine what 20% lower potency actually translates to.
Well then
You
too,
can apply a similar logic to a lot of other things. For instance, what does 80% potency mean when applied to things like instant death spells?
yeah.
Does it reduce the chances of success?
Yeah,
If so,
I'd probably
how does
say
that
yeah.
work? What's the formula for calculating the chances
Those
of
little freaking
inflicting a
dudes.
negative status effect on an opponent? Does it scale based on a spell potency variable, which is reduced by an enemy's resistance or agility stat? So
that's a
if
slight
I go
question.
from 1000 spell potency to 800 spell potency versus the enemy's 900 resistance stat, then what are the chances that my debuff is now successful?
Yeah.
Perhaps it could be something as simple as if I initially had a 50% chance of causing instant death, then an 80% potency would reduce that to a 40% chance because of the way that probabilities work. There's just a whole bunch of variables that need to be considered. For the sake of
Damn,
simplicity,
that's really cool.
let's just assume that the actual overall output of any activity will work out to be 80% of the original, meaning a fixed 20% penalty on whatever, regardless of the situation. So when Pandora's actor uses a defensive skill, it's only around 80% as good at reducing damage.
Yeah, that's what
When
I was
he
gonna
attacks,
say.
he's
Like,
only doing
every
80%
ability
as
and
much
everything
damage.
you do.
When he's trying to dodge or resist a spell, he's only dodging it 80% as often. When he's trying to inflict a debuff or crowd control, he's only successful 80% as often. And when he tries to heal, he only heals for 80% as much damage. And that's that.
It all
So
makes
how
sense.
20% less
significant
health,
are all those
20%
penalties
less
in a
mana,
fight?
Stuff like that.
Well, in my initial example, you saw for yourself by the numbers how much of a difference that 20% really makes. Which leads us into the next question. What if a doppelganger gets into a fight with its original? With the two of them trading special attacks back and forth while trying to block and dodge with special abilities. Well, since the doppelganger would only deal around 80%
clearly
as
the
much damage on
doppelganger's gonna
offense and
lose.
would negate around 80% damage on defense, the total penalty would actually come out to be 64%, since they're applied to separate aspects of the fight. The penalties stack, meaning there's the less damage he does overall in combination with the increased damage that he's taking. So
Yeah.
to answer the question, by the math, you can fight a doppelganger of yourself and easily beat it with more than a third of your HP left. That said, this example is heavily abstracted, simplified, and generalized. It assumes a very simple fight where they take turns slapping
Yeah.
each other with a
Yeah,
tap
that's what I was gonna
and
say.
constantly
Yeah.
trying to block or dodge. It doesn't factor in tactics or strategy or special abilities.
Or critical
which could
hits.
swing the
Or
fight
armor,
radically in
Yeah.
one
or
direction or
special
another.
weapons.
Even if you are weaker, if you can ambush your enemy, then it doesn't matter
Yeah.
nearly as much.
Yeah, exactly.
I also
Unless
don't
you're these
factor in
guys.
the crowd control or
Yeah,
save.
they suck.
Hell, Ainz himself has spells which instantly kill the target if they aren't resisted. Like, if you're dead, you can't fight anymore. Of course, the key to figuring all this out
That
would
was
be
so
what
wild,
exactly 80% potency means in these
And he even
cases.
caught him too. God, I love that
Furthermore,
scene.
There's nothing stopping a doppelganger from changing into a form that gives it a significant advantage over the person it's imitating. And there's a lot of different situations where penalties to particular stats aren't nearly as important. If you transform into a stealthy archer or a ranged attacker and snipe them from a distance while in stealth, you might just be able to get multiple hits off and outright
Dang.
kill them before they can even react. Or you can just rain down artillery on them using heavy bombardment magic. If you're just planning on doing these hit and run tactics, it doesn't matter nearly as much that you have less defensive abilities than someone else. The only thing
So
that
you
really
can,
matters
like,
in that type of
use your
situation is
transformations
that you
to
do less damage.
transform
And
into,
it's
like,
not like you even
a
need to
weakness
use a
for that
doppelganger
person.
to
Yeah,
fight.
yeah, exactly.
They can imitate craftsmen to build and smith gear, then switch to alchemy and build and make lots of powerful potions, then switch over to a divination build and recon the enemy, then switch to a commander that's built to buff everyone, and then switch back to a combat build to actually fight. Of course, they'll just be 20% worse at these things, whatever that means. But as you can tell, there's definitely a lot of things that need to be considered when talking about this reduced potency effect of imitation.
Yeah, for
Once again,
sure.
how does it apply to buffs and disables? Does it reduce both the magnitude of the effect and the duration? What about the number of uses or the MP cost? And what
That's what I was about to say, because he did talk about like the like how many people can he doppelgang or whatever, and
Yeah, like in a specific amount of time. or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. So I mean, there's always that question too. It's like it's not like, you know, like Mystique or whatever
Yeah.
in X-Men's just able to
Keep changing, like, quickly.
Yeah, so like I wonder if he could do that, but we really haven't ever seen it,
Mm-mm.
so I don't know.
About
I don't
healing.
think so, but
What
maybe
does it really look like if I only heal 80% as much as a
she, I
properly
think, was
built
only
healer?
doing it.
Does that just mean that I have to
The
spend more mana to heal that
visuals,
same
though.
amount of HP? Those of you who have ever played an MMO know that it's not that simple. Put aside the complicated
That's the coolest
considerations
picture
of
of him.
overhealing
Yeah, it
and
really
MP
is.
sustain for just a second. You know that if you can't keep pace with the incoming damage as a healer, a single person dropping can lead to a chain reaction of events that just results in a devastating
wipe.
party wipe.
Yeah,
Anyway, my whole point regarding all of this is that penalties can actually stack together in unexpected ways and end up being a lot more significant than just 20%. A
Yeah.
doppelganger could be massively inferior, or just slightly worse than whatever specialist that they happen to be imitating. It's all situational. But at the end of the day, what a doppelganger sacrifices in raw capability, they make up for in versatility and flexibility.
Yeah.
Their form of imitation can round out any party or fill any role. Mechanically speaking, they're less suited for established guilds and more for solo play or pickup groups. Their use in something like guild combat is exactly what you expect, for deception. They look and play close enough to the original that they can fool the unsuspecting. You can make your forces look more powerful than they really are by mixing in NPC doppelgangers. You could imitate your opponents and trick their friends and guildmates into giving you intel or free stuff.
Right.
Yggdrasil is a game of information and deception. Ambushes, tactics, and strategy matter a lot more than just raw power.
Yeah.
But I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up
Like, you
for
just
today.
don't go
That's
one
pretty
on
much all
one.
the stuff on Doppelgangers. But we're only halfway through explaining Pandora's actors' powers and abilities. So be sure to join me next time for part 2 of part 2.
Yes!
Actually,
heck
before I
yeah.
go once again,
Look at how many shirts they did have! Bring it back, AniNews! Bring it back!
Yeah, there's so many.
Oh, they were so
while getting
cool!
something that I hope is nice in return.
Dang
But
it!
yeah, thank you for.
Anyways, go sub their channel for sure. Make sure that you do that. But
Yeah.
also make sure you ask them to bring back their freaking merch because I want to buy some. Dude, also just gotta say, like I know you were saying at the end there that really a doppelganger is mainly primarily going to be used to like deceive people and trick them and stuff like that.
Yeah,
in
tactical
a team.
advantage, kind of.
Also, he did bring up that really good point that even though they might not have 20% of the damage and freaking defense or whatever of that person, they could still like Demiurge, I'm positive, would find a better battle strategic reason to use a doppelganger, even if it wasn't like a big battle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Obviously, like you would probably try to use them to like manipulate them psychologically or something like that. But beyond just that, like using their battle advantages, like their attacks and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know, man.
Well, like I feel like doppelganger's use is more for like if you know that a battle's coming up or if you know you're going on this kind of adventure, you can plan accordingly on how to use them.
Yeah.
But like if it's a thing that just pops up randomly and you're a doppelganger and there's somebody that's coming to fight you, you got to think more like on your feet about what to do instead of like, oh, I'm just going to turn into that person and fight them as them.
Yeah. But man, I don't know. It opened up a whole lot of like thoughts for me in doppelgangers because like
Yeah, really.
I don't know. I guess I've always only thought of them like face value, and like I keep putting back to like Mystique because from X-Men I grew up watching like the original X-Men series and stuff like that. Mystique, super baddie. I mean, good God, but she could transform into like anybody, and she used that a lot of the times for like political reasons. You know what I mean? Like she'd be in like
subterfuge.
Yeah. So like I feel like that's a lot of the times how we all often look at doppelgangers and stuff. It would be like for like those type of tactics, but then being able to use like at least in Yggdrasil, being able to use their attacks and stuff like that, being able to use those abilities, I think that would be really beneficial in other ways too, and especially like the archery and stuff like that, like sharpshooters and stuff. I mean, dude, I'd be like doppelganger on the roof, doppelganger over there.
Yeah.
You know?
Like if you use Pokemon for an example, and you have somebody that throws out a Pokemon and it's fire, and then what's the weakness of fire? Was it rock,
like water,
earth, or is it water?
Yeah.
So the weakness of fire, you would instead of throwing out, you would throw out your doppelganger and have a fire one.
Yeah.
Or a water one.
Yeah.
So you can use their weaknesses to kind of counteract that 20% less that you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, just like, in that example for sure. I mean, there's like, so I don't know. There's a lot of really cool different ways
to know their weakness to know how to do that though.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So that would be the only other thing.
And again, I gotta say, man, like y'all know probably more than we do for sure from like anybody that's read the light novels and stuff. But like, I don't know that there's really anybody that could stand against Hines right now. But the way that you're using Pandora's actor as kind of like a are they using him right now as like a villain? Or no, they're using him as the actual good guy. Yeah. They're using him right now, parading as the savior kind of.
Oh, okay, yeah. Like,
so I love the way they're using him right now, but I feel like I've been curious a lot about his attacks and stuff like that. I guess now we know for sure, like how much he's actually standing up against Ainz. Like Ainz is just toying with him clearly, and now we know that for sure.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Either way, homies, thank you very much for checking this one out. If we don't catch y'all before, happy freaking Merry Christmas out there.
Merry Christmas.
And we'll catch you guys soon, man. Talk to y'all later. Freaking toodles.
Later.
Bye.